record. Perfect.
Okay.
It's official now.
Right, I'm glad that there's that affirmation. All right, so hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Independent Living Across Canada Day Lived Experience panel. We are so excited that we can virtually connect with you for today's celebrations. And at this point, I will ask all attendees to mute your microphones so there is no feedback. Additionally, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to type those in the Zoom chat box. And there will also be an opportunity later on in the event to ask our panelists questions. And you can do this within the chat box, or you can also unmute your microphone and ask your questions verbally. Finally, we are recording this event for those who are not able to attend today's celebrations. So before I introduce our panelists for today's event, we want to acknowledge that our Independent Living Across Canada Day virtual events take place in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. These lands are covered by the treaties of peace and friendship that date from the mid to late 1700s. And we are so thankful to be able to live, work, and play on these lands as people with disabilities and as Nova Scotians. So for today's lived experience panel event, we have three panelists with us. Julianne Acker-Verney embraces her life as a woman with disabilities. Julianne has extensive experience as a self-advocate and supporting other persons with disabilities seeking access and inclusion. She recently completed her Master of Arts thesis research, which focused on supporting the full participation of diverse women with disabilities in research. She is also a past member of the Independent Living Nova Scotia Association Board of Directors, as well as the Independent Living Canada Board of Directors, and the Alexa McDonough Institute for Women, Gender, and Social Justice Steering Committee. She currently sits on the Halifax Lancers Board of Directors and the Halifax Lancers Therapeutic Writing Community. Our next panelist is Randy Reede, and he has been our Information Outreach Coordinator at ILNS since September of 2012. Randy's corporate experience with the Royal Bank and the nonprofit sector experience with the Canadian Paraplegic Association of Nova Scotia have provided him with the essential skills needed to build stakeholder relations. And our final panelist for today is Heather Baglow. And she is another colleague of ours at ILNS, and she joined the team as a program specialist in 2019. She has a Bachelor of Arts in History from Mount Allison University and a Master of Arts in Women's and Gender Studies from St. Mary's University. And she is also currently working towards a Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology with the goal of being a counseling therapist in the future. She is passionate about social justice, advocacy, and has experience developing educational resources for youth, women, and LGBTQ2+ persons. So thank you all for joining us this morning. I will start off with some questions for our panelists to answer, and then we have left room for questions at the end of the event from the audience. So let's get started. So I know I just gave a little bit of information on each of our panelists, but what I would like to start off with is if each of you could tell us a little bit more about yourselves. So Julianne, how about we start off with you?
Sure. And thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks very much for the invitation. A little bit more about me. I think I'm actually pretty boring, but I will say that I take a lot of pleasure in things that have come to me from the experience of being blind. And as you know, I think probably this isn't news to anyone who also lives with disabilities. Things just they just evolve. So it used to be one time I was visually impaired, and then I became blind, and then I became blind and hard of hearing, and then I became blind, hard of hearing, and with arthritis, and things just become. But it's all one experience. So it's a I think it's not layered so much. It's just integrated. So I don't think of myself as any one of those things. I'm Julianne, and I embody all of those things and more. But I think one of the things that has come to me as something that is really special and something I cherish is being my experiences working with guide dogs over the years. So I've worked with 4. And my 4th one now has just retired, and I will once things settle down go for to be paired with another one. I would say I love an experience that I would have never otherwise had if not for being blind, and so I'm just really grateful for that every day. Which is good because, in the middle of the night, if your guide dog needs to go out and it's raining or icy or whatever, you go. So it's good to really have that balanced with joy and love.
Well, that's perfect. Thank you so much for talking about that experience. Yeah, I can imagine that, having that balance and having, the guide dogs that you have has been quite a journey in and of itself, but that's great. Thank you. So Randy, how about you? Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, you can see behind me, I have my cane behind me. My crutch.
Perfect.
And I did that for the optics of all this. So
thank you.
So, with my disability, I guess, I see things like virus accessibility, and I don't know if a lot of you know that when I first had my disability, I was paralyzed from the neck down. So I've recovered from that, and there was a time that I was walking without any canes at all. I did the Rick Hansen Wheels in Motion. I did the 10 kilometers without any crutches. I can't, I think about that today, and it makes me like, I can't believe that was me at that time. So I've gone through this process where I've, had crutches, had 2 crutches, I was in a wheelchair. So it's just strange how this is evolving for me. It's like, and then I walk without any assistance at all. And now I'm coming back where I'm using a cane, I'm using 2 crutches. And as I get older, and that reflects back to accessibility too, and exactly the things that you can do in the community, as far as like accessing, going to restaurants or anything like that. It's about, free community, like participation in the community. So yeah, so it's just, but I'm trying, I still exercise, I still try to maintain what I can, but other than that, I mean, I did the Blue Nose a few years ago too. So that was something accomplishment that I was very proud of for doing the 5K. But other than that, I just, I try to be an advocate for myself as well when it comes to disability issues. So I think that's important for anybody that has a disability, is to be an advocate. You can count on other people, but at the end of the day, it's you who's going to make that change and try to find that support. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Great. No, that's great. Thank you for sharing all of that, Randy. That's, I appreciate that. And I'm sure we all appreciate that. And then our final panelist, Heather, how about you tell us a little bit more about yourself as well?
Sure. Well, in terms of disability, I live with anxiety and panic disorders. So that's something that I've been dealing with for about 10 years now, I would say. Although there are times I could look back and maybe even think about childhood and the ways I was maybe a little anxious Heather that didn't always have the words for that experience. And so my experience with disability advocacy very much comes from the mental health field. As you said, Caitlin, I'm working toward my master's in counseling psychology with the eventual goal of being a therapist, because I certainly feel that I've seen such a marked change in the way people are willing to talk about mental illness and talk about their experiences with their brains. I think brains are one of the most, they are probably one of the most important organs that we have, but we often neglect to take care of our brains in the same ways that we take care of maybe our outer selves or notice our outer selves in a different way. So that's definitely a passion of mine and something that I try to bring to my work. I've been at ILNS for about a year and a half, and I work with our youth programs doing employment support. And it's been really a wonderful journey working with youth over a long period of time and getting to know like their specific needs and learning about the ways that their disability doesn't define who they are and what they can do. I think I've really grown to understand like why we work cross disabilities and why that's so vital to kind of help remind us all that, you know, even if we might live with various challenges, we also live with a lot of similarities. And those are the things that are going to help carry us through. So that's kind of been something I like bringing forward in my work here. And then for just sort of little personal things, I am, as we were talking about coffee and tea earlier, I am a hot tea but iced coffee lover. And I also, for pets, I'm a cat person. So while Julianne has dogs, I tend to snuggle with cats and let them calm my anxiety. So that's my little pet trick there.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Heather. I appreciate you disclosing that and providing that information for us. You know, you mentioned the brain is so important, and you're right. Sometimes we don't take care of it as, you know, we would possibly other parts of our body. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So the next question I have has to do with COVID-19. So how has the pandemic had a positive and or a negative impact on your life? And maybe this time, let's start with Randy.
I would say, actually, I've got closer to, I think, certain people in my life and, you know, making them connections. But then again, there's other people that I've got sort of like I felt farther away from because you can't make that connection. So I think those are the two things that I realized that, you know, for instance, you know, I think I've got closer actually because actually my daughter, for instance, and her partner were in my bubble. So in fact, we've sort of got closer, and it's been good. And on the other hand, my family, actually, I've only visited my family in Yarmouth probably once or twice over the last year. So but I mean, we still connect by phone, but it's still not the same. So those two things there, I think that are and not going to the gym as well. I mean, that's been a difficult thing for me as well, but I've been trying to do other things to try to stay active and, you know, keep your mind, you know, it's not only a physical thing for me, but it's also a mental thing, being active. So anyway, that's it.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate, you know, connecting with family and all of that in different ways. You know, it can be, I guess that's one way the pandemic has brought us closer to one another, but it can be difficult not being able to see certain people and friends in person. So thank you. Heather, how has the pandemic had a positive and or negative impact on your life?
I would certainly agree with Randy about the surprising, you know, ways that you'd build better intimacy with some people, while others you might grow farther apart. For example, I found that with some friends, I got closer because I had to create creative ways to connect. You know, whether that's like figuring out how to play games online. Also with my sisters online together, and that's been really fun, and a really cool way to connect with them when before I wasn't really able to. I would say though that as a very social person myself, I've definitely found it hard being so isolated and staying indoors. I really enjoy my work connecting with youth and leading classrooms. You know, I'm a teacher. I'm often getting my energy from others. So it's definitely been a challenge reorienting to teaching virtually, or managing a lot of my own time. You know, even when I'm here at the office, and I have my colleagues, you know, buzzing around me, that helps me stay focused in a way that I find it difficult to by myself at home. So learning both what I need as, you know, a worker or even just as a human being, and the kinds of connections that I need to maintain to keep my.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I know that has definitely been a struggle for a lot of folks. So I'm really hoping that we're on the way out. You know, we talked earlier, there are a few of us in the office today, and I know even from my experience, I never want to work from home again. So again, thank you for sharing that difficulty with us. All right, and then Julianne, how has the pandemic had a positive or negative impact on your life?
Well, I think like everyone else, it's been a mixed bag of both good and bad. Some things have been surprising. I mean, I would say, you know, like others, relationships, it's been like we have tried to maintain strong relationships with people who are, you know, really important to us. I say us and we, my husband and I. But and that's, I would say, has, like, we've put particular effort into that, and I think that has resulted in some really good things. Like we meet virtually with people on the weekend, so we might have, you know, coffee with somebody on Friday nights, and you know, a chat with somebody else on, or another group of people on Saturday night. And so we've been trying to do that regularly, and that has really been different, but better than I would have thought. You know, in the beginning, I didn't think that was going to be really very rewarding, but it has been for us and for the folks I think we've been you know, engaging with or talking to. I've been working at home for years, and it can be an isolating experience. Over the last, well, since March of last year, my husband has been working home too. And this for me has been awesome. I actually eat lunch. I could, if I'm working alone, as I've been doing like periodically for years, and there's no one else around, like my guide dog will tell me, or my other, like we have a pet dog as well. They'll say, you know, we need to go pee, and I'll get up and take them to go outdoors, and then I'll realize, oh yeah, it's lunchtime, I should eat something. So I'll, you know, do something really quick, eat it, and come back to work. And that's, or some days, honestly, not eat lunch. That's not a good thing to do. So having someone else around, it's not just that I eat lunch. I'll take a break at lunchtime. I'll even think about lunch ahead of time, so I have a plan. You know, I'm not just grabbing like a spoonful of peanut butter. Honestly, I've done that on the way by. So I'm not doing that kind of thing. So it's a good thing. That's a good thing. One of the stressors for me has been trying, well, I guess there have been a couple of things. One has been trying to stay away from people, like going into stores with arrows. I have no idea. If someone is coming toward me, I have no idea. I'm hoping, like, I'm trying to do my part, and I hope they're trying to do, like, they notice me and they care. So I'm hoping that all of that is happening, but that's a real stressor for me. So to meet someone on a sidewalk or in the street, particularly because I feel more at risk in the street. I hope they move because I'm not always able to move. Those types of things are stressful. And the other thing is that I have retired. My dog, Heather will know, Eric, but I really don't feel it's the time to go for another dog. And so, that is another stressor as I try to figure out when is the right time to do that. And what conditions have to be in play before I feel comfortable doing that. That's a long drawn out answer.
No, and thank you so much for sharing those experiences with us. Because yeah, that has been, with the physical distancing, and yeah, especially you mentioned the arrows, sometimes I've even noticed that people don't follow those arrows, but yeah, it's very important for you that, you're hoping that others are keeping that distance and whatnot. So thank you so much for sharing that, both those positive and stressful experiences. That's very important. All right, so moving on to our next question. What are some coping skills that you've used during the pandemic and the resulting periods of lockdown? So Heather, how about we go to you first for that one?
Sure. I found that I really needed to learn how to get away from screens, because a lot of my entertainment was coming from screens, whether that's video games, watching TV, looking at my phone, you name it. Especially with working from home, I was already on screens most of my day. So that's been a challenge, but I have integrated some good stuff in my life. Lockdown, almost like a lockdown crisis or lockdown brain, where you took up a hobby that feels a little almost silly or different for you. So last spring, I bought a hula hoop.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that's been a really fun little, a way to get myself outside and play. And I've been using that a little bit. Also, my partner and I will often get out for walks, and we've been walking more than ever, which feels really good. And we'll often try to turn it into some kind of game as a way to keep our brains working, especially with lockdowns, when you need to try to stay within your own neighborhood or community. It can feel a little more like you're just looking at the same things or walking the same routes. And so we would try to say, okay, let's play a game where I say a word and you try to sing a song with the word in it. Or let's look at the signs around us and try to find the letters of the alphabet in order. Just anything to keep us kind of thinking and, have our brains somewhere. So I think that's been really helpful. And then I have a group of friends who we watch the same TV show when it is on every week, because it comes out like every Friday evening, for example. And that's truly been one of the best parts of this pandemic, is having a weekly TV show to look forward to, an anchor that you have each week, and especially sharing it with others. We're typing in our group chat with our reactions, or we're the few times we are able to get together in person, it feels like we're sharing in an experience. So I would say that combination of things has really helped me pull through these various lockdowns.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I really like the even when you're walking outside and having those focusing activities. That's a good one. I'll have to try that out the next time my partner and I are able to go for a walk. So thank you. And Julianne, what have been some of the coping skills you've developed during the pandemic and even the periods of lockdown that we've experienced?
I would say, like Heather, I spend a lot of time in front of, well, I will say a lot of technology, just a ton of technology that I feel, technology that I like, my braille displays, technology, all technology I hear. And so I have never really thought of that as entertainment. Not to say I don't enjoy it, I do, but it's also always been associated with work or study or whatever. So particularly over the last year, I too have been looking for things to kind of manage the everyday stresses, you know, that and as they're kind of accumulating then with additional pandemic stresses, like things that would change routinely due to the pandemic, like if you could go out, if you couldn't go out, you know, all that stuff. And so I love the hula hoop idea, Heather. I actually bought an El Cheapo ukulele. So I've played guitar for years and things, but I never played a ukulele, so I knew nothing about it. And I decided to buy a ukulele. And I love that little thing. It's a happy little instrument. So I have done that. And the other thing I have tried to do, because I can, you know, I'm a little bit of an overachiever type. So I really try to not have ukulele. So it's okay to sound, however it sounds is okay. I am goal oriented. So the goal is to play it and have fun, not to sound good. And that's a good thing because I meet that goal routinely. And I would say the last thing I will say is, excuse me, one of the things that I realized pretty much, you know, well, over the last number of years, not just with the pandemic, but Facebook, a lot of people use Facebook. A lot of my friends use Facebook. I have a lot of friends on Facebook. I sometimes will go a very long time without Facebook because I just, that's another source of stress for me because whatever bad is happening in someone else's life I can easily have a place for that to nest. And so I've been managing how often, how much of that I've been taking into. And I actually, although I miss things, you know, a lot of people share a lot of events and things like that. So that's a sad thing about that, but I really find that helps my mental health.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I can remember, I think even in the first lockdown, you know, not after a while of just constantly looking at social media and looking at the news and looking at everything. Yeah, it was very important to take a step back and set some boundaries. So that is great. And I love that you're learning the ukulele. I've always wanted to learn, so maybe that's my next goal. That's great.
Maybe we could sound bad together.
That sounds great to me. All right. And Randy, what are some of your own coping skills that you've used throughout this pandemic?
Well, one of the things, Pierre, you might understand, but one thing that's caused me a lot of stress is Toronto Maple Leafs, watching them on TV in the playoffs. So the other night, actually, I did not watch the game.
All right.
The last game, I did not watch it because it was too, you know, just causing. So I think sometimes like TV can be as well as the computer can be a bit stress as well. So, and one of the things that my daughter and her partner and I we actually sing on Friday nights. So we actually sing, and I can sing. I don't know if I can sing, but not bad, but you know. So anyway, one of the things that we do, we get songs together, we put them in this binder. And then we actually, because my daughter's partner, he used to be on a jazz band. So he plays guitar. He's so good. He's amazing. So anyway, we put these songs that we want to do, and some of the older songs as well. And my daughter used to not be into the older stuff, even like from the 70s and from the 80s and even the 60s. I used to play it to her when she was very young, and she would say, "Oh, that's just Grampy's music. I don't want to listen to that." So anyway, we have these. So our band is called Binder.
Oh, right on.
That's perfect.
So anyway, during the week, I think about songs that we can do. It preoccupies my time, songs that we can do and sing. And, you know, it's really like, you know, trying to get off of what's going on with the pandemic and everything, and it focus. As well, I don't know, some of you know that I also write poetry.
Okay.
So that helps me out as well. And, you know, several years ago, actually, I was at Poetry Month. I read actually at City Hall, me and several other people. So it's really helps me, you know, especially I find, you know, sometimes when you're alone, you know, you're more creative by yourself. So that's really helped out a lot as well, release stress, and walking and just getting out in nature too is very important. So anyway, those are the things that I, you know.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I love that you have a little musical group. I feel like we're all maybe we'll need to
Yeah, you sing too, Caitlin, don't you?
a little.
Yeah.
We'll need to strategize.
Yeah, we could have an ILNS band.
ILNS music group.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
The Independents.
Yeah, there you go. Thank
Yes.
you. There we go.
The Binder clips.
That's perfect. Thank you. All right. So in kind of bridging off from the question I just asked, as a follow-up, I'm wondering, are there any ways that you have maintained your stress management and self-care during the pandemic? And maybe Julianne, we can start with you.
Sure. Well, I would, so I have, I'm really so fortunate to have a treadmill and things like that. It's not a new treadmill, it's a very old treadmill. But that's how I do my walking and running, running in particular. And I like running because it is not just like, it takes effort. Sometimes I can be mentally tired, but not have worked out the physical feelings. And so running helps me do that. And it's the way I run anyway. It's a very stomping kind of, you know, run. I don't make it sound very pretty. It probably isn't, but it's a great way to kind of get out that energy. So I do that kind of thing. I do yoga. Some I try to, my goal is to stay flexible. And because of my arthritis and so on, that's really important. And also to maintain strength and stamina. So I try to do that. And I find that really is helpful. I can really feel like I do not want to do any of it, but I always feel better after I do something. So getting on the treadmill and walking for 30 minutes will really help me feel better. And, you know, there's nothing like brushing a dog. The thing about guide dogs is, well, any dog, but my experience has been particularly with guide dogs. They are just so, like, you have to really remember that they are in the moment always. So if we make a mistake, if we have to do something over, if I have to give a bit of a correction because of anything, either they've missed a step or, you know, they've been distracted by a tennis ball or, you know, whatever. The thing that I've learned over the years is that, like, you can't carry that forward into any other moment other than the one it happens in. And I credit that and them with helping me really be able to move on from things and recognize that it happened. it was whatever it was at the moment. But the moment has passed, and I now need to experience this moment, and so that's been really helpful. I'm not like perfect at it or anything, but it's been a really helpful thing that they continue to teach me.
Oh wow, yeah, that's great. Yeah, wow. Thank you for that. All right, Heather, how else have you maintained your stress management and self-care during the pandemic?
It's been hard. You know, I think especially at times, you know, you get where you might have a few cloudy days and then maybe the sun peeks out again and you're feeling better. But I think also learning to accept and sit peacefully with those cloudy days has been a practice that I've been learning to embrace, because a lot of the time when we feel anything negative, we try to just push it away and tamp it down because we were like, no, we shouldn't feel this way. We should on ourselves. I love that phrase. And instead, you know, sit in it and say, accept how you're feeling, you know, to say, today I feel crummy. That is my reality. Can actually help it move through you a lot better. And so you ultimately come out the other side, not holding it in the same way. Pushing it aside doesn't necessarily get rid of it. It just keeps it sitting there. And so learning, I guess, to accept those moments and to like treat myself with a bit more self-compassion has been, I think, an important practice of mine over the past year. I've also been trying to learn how to, kind of similarly with what I was saying earlier about getting away from screens, is to put it into kind of anything. So where I'm either, if I'm getting out and moving, but if I can't go for a walk, maybe all I'm able to do is stretch on my living room floor. I can't even do a full yoga and listen to somebody, but maybe if the TV's on, I can lie there, you know, with my legs in the air, half listening to it, and it's still something. Because again, we can put pressure on ourselves that, oh, if it's not a 30-minute walk, it's not good enough, you know? And so saying like, hey, even rolling off the couch onto the floor and then stretching, laying down is something. So it's often about offering ourselves grace and giving ourselves the grace we would often offer other people. And then finally, I think embracing an art practice. So I've started doodling. I just got a little bullet journal. So instead of lines, it's little dots. And even though I'm not good, it's displacing and putting color on a page. And at the end, I'm like, oh, I created this thing, even if it's a mess, or even if I made mistakes. This is something that didn't exist 30 minutes ago. And I find that that really helps to kind of displace whatever is going on internally and putting it kind of somewhere physically in the world.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Those are all great, you know, self-care activities and methods. And I really appreciate you sharing even, you know, the term having grace with ourselves, because yeah, it is important. And I know from even my experience that, you know, sometimes I'm very much I should be doing this, or I should be feeling this way. So yeah, that's very important throughout the pandemic and even after, you know, as we move towards hopefully, you know, getting out of this. So thank you for that. And Randy, are there other ways that you have maintained your stress management and self-care during the pandemic?
I can appreciate Julianne and Heather and what they say. And Heather, getting back to what you said about just doing something. Like, you know, I have weights actually here in the apartment, like small weights, but just getting up and doing something. You know, again, it's like the, you know, internet. You know, I do a bit of stretching, and just, you know, for me, having this disability and spasticity, it's just getting up on my feet and standing, like say, doing things for a half hour to an hour, just standing on my feet, doing some weights. You know, sometimes you don't feel like going for a walk, and, you know, and whatever. So, but you're doing something and you feel it feels good just to be able to do that. Stretching, same thing, Heather, I do the same thing, I stretch. But just getting, doing a walk, like actually a couple weeks ago I was in public gardens. And again, we were talking earlier about people getting close to you, and it was so awful. I mean, there was probably 10% of people in the park and it was full, and that had masks on. So I was very paranoid. People would come towards me, a group, no masks, it's outside, but I was very nervous. So I actually found a gymnasium now that I actually do some walking in, and that's really helped me out quite a bit as well. So, but I think that, you have to realize that many people are in, one of the things that I think about is many people are in the same boat. We're separate, but we're all together here, everybody, and that's something you have to remember, that, sometimes you feel alone. I'm only one that's suffering this, but you feel a kinship that that a lot of people are also trying to cope with the pandemic as well. So, but just, and again, like Heather, I just really want to thank you for mentioning that stuff, that, doing little things like stretching, and I just really, and even doing a walk, Julianne, afterwards, like, you don't want to do it, but once you get doing it, it's like last week I walked in this gymnasium. I probably did 1.5 kilometers to 2 kilometers. I was dead after 1 kilometer, but I kept going. You know what I mean? I was such in a rhythm. And then when I was done, and walking and activity again frees up my spasticity. I'm so tight, but when I walk and be active, so mentally I felt great afterwards. So just, it's about getting up and doing something, and you don't, just because you don't do a 2 kilometer walk one day, you can do a little something else. And I think that helps you mentally, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Randy. Yeah. Yeah, all of these things are very important for our own self-care throughout this period and even beyond again. All right, so the next question I have is, what have you noticed from your own experience about the ways people with disabilities have both survived and thrived during the past, I guess, little over a year in response to COVID-19? So Heather, how about you talk about that first?
Sure. Definitely, I've seen a combination of kind of both this surviving and thriving. Sometimes all we can do is get through day to day. But I've seen some really cool things come through as well. Something that Julianne said earlier really resonated with me about how she has been working from home for longer than the pandemic, right? This has been a reality of hers for a variety of reasons. But I think that struck a chord with me because people with disabilities, especially folks who maybe can't access certain spaces, for many years have been asking for these types of accommodations, whether that's working from home, closed captioning or ASL on Zoom. Sick time is another one. And I think a piece that's really, it's been exciting but frustrating has been seeing how, once the pandemic hit, suddenly businesses were much more open to these kinds of accommodations. And I guess I would put that under almost a surviving mode, where it just feels like, people with disabilities weren't given the opportunity to thrive and have access to work in the same ways that, able-bodied folks or neurotypical folks have been able to do since the pandemic started. But I'm really, really hoping that these broader accommodations are going to, I don't want to go back to the way things were. I want the positive changes that have come out to continue, including these bigger, like these accommodations and more working from home. And this flexibility for people, I think, is really, really important. And I think in a way that's been a win for a lot of folks with disabilities that I'm just hoping we can grasp onto, and that people don't think that we're just going to switch back to all the former practices. As well, I think that that broader discussions about mental health and the impact of isolation has been really valuable. And I think that has that is another thing that a lot of folks with disabilities, especially those who maybe live with chronic pain or environmental sensitivities, or reasons that it's harder to get out in the world. Maybe it's because people have immunosuppressed and they can't wear masks. In a way, masks have made the world more accessible. And so I think it's really neat that we're seeing all these different ways that the pandemic has shown us how we can care for the rest of our community in ways that aren't really as much of a hindrance as maybe we tried to claim before. So I'm really hoping that the people with disabilities, especially maybe these ones that have offered these types of challenges I'm bringing up, are able to maintain those things that are now helping them thrive and be able to live, more comfortably. That's my goal.
Yeah, no, and that's a really good point, Heather. And, yeah, definitely the pandemic. And I'm certainly on board with you. I'm hoping that, especially with being able to work from home and having, a variety of accommodations that should have been in place before the pandemic can definitely continue. Because, we've as a community and as a broad community, we've been able to show that we can still stay connected regardless of where we're from, right? So thank you for that. Yeah, Julianne, what have you noticed from your experience about the ways people with disabilities have both survived and thrived during the pandemic?
Yeah, and I think I would agree with what Heather has said, and I think I'll try to just complement that a bit. I think for, in terms, I'm thinking of people I've spoken to who have used, now telehealth or the remote access to healthcare has in some ways been really helpful to people who otherwise would have to spend money on transportation they don't have, would have to find transportation or not go, or all those types of things. And that's been really helpful. On the other hand, there are situations where people who are blind or visually impaired are either in alone and having to, for instance, describe wounds to someone who can't see it, and they can't see it, and there's no one to ask. So I think or no one they feel comfortable asking, and maybe no one they choose to ask to help them with this type of thing. So it's really complex, I think. But I am really happy now that because of the mass demand, things like Zoom and remote learning and remote work and all of those things are now commonplace. I totally agree. We don't want normal, like quote unquote, what was going back to normal. No, we don't. We can do better than that. We can do better than what we're doing right now. We can make, technology accessible, like truly accessible to Nova Scotians. We can do better, and I think that's something that would help people thrive for sure. At the same time, and this will be my last comment because I don't want to take too much time, but I have been really humbled and proud and all of those things to see people with disabilities come together across the country and advocate for change without any resources. I mean, we know this happens all the time. I mean, the independent living movement has been doing this work for a long time with sometimes very, very, very minimal support. Over the pandemic, particularly in the first stages, people with disabilities were not, we were talked about as though we were all the same and we were all vulnerable without agency and we were all these things, but we weren't being taken into consideration with policy as policy was being designed and implemented.
Mhm.
And so across the country, people with disabilities came together, found ways to come together and push back against that. And I just think, I'm just very happy that happened. And hopeful it will continue to happen with the same sort of solidarity while providing enough space for that individual support that needs to happen. And the kind of the recognizing that we're all different. We have similarities, but we are all in different spaces, living different lives, and we need support that is personalized and responsive.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah, no, and those are all great points. So thank you for sharing that, Julianne. It is very important to recognize all of those things, especially about, supports are going to look different for everyone. And how do we continue to engage and make sure that our presence is, valued and taken seriously. So thank you for sharing all of that information. All right, and Randy, have you noticed anything from your own experience or from the experiences of other people with disabilities who have both survived and thrived during the pandemic?
I would say I just want to, it's basically what Heather and Julianne said.
All right,
And
yeah.
one of the things, first, I just think that persons with disabilities, and again, hopefully things will not, hopefully we made some progress. I mean, even though it's been a negative experience a lot for COVID, I hopefully, going forward, we made a positive impact on the changes. And one of the things too is like, I think that persons with disabilities, it's unbelievable today that they are unable to, let's say, have or access the internet. I mean, that's something that should be a given, I mean, some of the services, like accessing services, like even groceries, getting groceries online and things like that, it's made a difference for a lot of individuals.
Mhm.
And even like vaccinations, they have a number that you can call if you don't have the internet or
Yeah.
you're unable to use the internet. But still, it's just frustrating to me that in today's that people, I mean, it's a lifeline, for persons with disabilities. A lot of times the internet can be, and the fact that people still don't have the internet with disabilities is
Yeah.
something that I hopefully going forward will change.
Yeah.
So
Ah.
that's all I have to say. Yeah. Thank you.
But no, thank you for sharing that. That is a good point. And again, yeah, that is another thing about the pandemic is having that access to internet and different types of internet and even different technology pieces and everything that comes with that. So that is a good point. Thank you. All right. So what advice would you give others who are struggling throughout, or I mean, we're kind of starting to come out of this current lockdown, but who have struggled throughout this pandemic? And maybe Heather, we can start with you.
Sure. I kind of came up with two pieces here. One really reflects something I said earlier, which is that it's okay to be struggling. So as much as I, want to tell people like, at least you're not, blank. Ultimately, it's okay to struggle. I think that's a piece that we miss sometimes in the mental health sort of factor of everything, is that having a hard time doesn't make you less than, and it often doesn't bring the judgment of others. Telling others often will bring you community. We are going through a major thing as a community, even as a globe, as a global community. And I think that there's something really powerful about, again, using that word grace, allowing yourself that grace to struggle. I think can also be really inspiring for the people around you, that you don't always have to, fake it. However, if there's one practice that's been really helpful for me over the past year, it has been gratitude. Trying to remember the parts of my life that I'm so thankful for, really, really helps even alleviate my mood in the moment. Some days it might feel a lot harder than others to think of things that you're grateful for, or you might have to think of the most basic things that are gonna, carry you through the next day. Sometimes for me, it's the Kit Kat bar that I got at the grocery store that I'm grateful for because it's getting me through, and other times I'm able to feel more broadly thankful for everything that I have and all of the wonderful blessings in my life. But when people aren't practicing gratitude, it's so easy to kind of remain in those negative spirals and to stay in that struggle. So there needs to be balance of offering yourself the grace to struggle while still trying to and practicing the muscle of gratitude. I think, flexing that muscle and making it stronger.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that, Heather. That's definitely helpful. And Randy, let's go back to you. So what advice would you give others who are struggling during this time?
Well, one of the things that people, I think one of the important things, friends or whatever, family, one of the things that I do during the pandemic, and I mean, I've done it before, but I think more now with the pandemic, is it's not sort of like the question, but sort of just listen to people, listen to what they have to say. And, I try to give advice, for certain things, but I, my main thing that I do a lot is just listen to people and try, and I ask them, I sort of give them advice to maybe search out solutions if they can and try to connect with as many people as they can to find solutions for their situation, or, and letting them know that, myself, I get down and Heather, being in that great sort of thing. It's like, but you have to, I always, for instance, like if I don't walk one day or I don't do this, I don't stretch or whatever, I always know there's another day. I always keep better. So you just got to keep hope going and just sort of knowing that things are going to get better and have that strength and just sort of be in that moment that that this is the way it is, but eventually things are going to change and you got to have that hope. So that's what I try to give people's advice. And again, just listening to people is I think makes a great difference. Just letting people, knowing that there's somebody there to listen to them, and not so much giving them advice. So.
Yeah, that's an important one, being able to just lend your ears and listen.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, that's what they're looking for, right? Is they just need to,
yes.
Whether they just need to go through a certain challenge or certain situations and just talk it through with someone else. So thank you for sharing that. And Julianne, what advice would you give to those who are struggling right now and throughout this the pandemic?
Yeah, I'm always really hesitant to give advice because I know so little about, what other people might be going through and where it's coming from and what they need. And I think from my time, I worked at the Independent Living Center when it was the Independent Living Resource Center a long time ago. And one of the things that I really came to, I guess, during that time was how important it was, as Randy said, to listen and to validate people and to, if anything, help them talk about what it is that's going on in their lives. Or if they don't want to talk about it, at least think about it as it is. And as Heather says, it's okay to feel, things just suck sometimes. They just do. And it feels sucky. As Tim says,
good.
There's a lot of suckage in the world right now. And,
let's be clear.
Yeah. I would say one of the things that I have learned, so I became blind later in life, and one of it just changed everything. Just everything changed. for me. I had to learn how to lay out my clothes differently, how to load the dishwasher, how to everything. And I kind of came to the place where I think it's good to not look too far behind or too far ahead. So there's no point in me trying to, and I'm kind of going through this again in my life, which is why it's top of mind. Because being blind, actually, change happens while you're blind, which is not something I thought about, but anyway, it does. So I'm kind of going through this again. Like it's no good for me to think about how this moment compared to any other moment. And it's no good to look too far ahead and worry about what's going to happen or what might happen. What is good for me to do is to think about this moment and what I'm going to do in this moment. And for me, that makes things feel less overwhelming. And there's nothing wrong with grieving the moments that have passed, like the normal that we knew, the good things that were what we knew. But sometimes I try to give myself a break from that, especially if I'm feeling scared, and try to find ways to not be as scared in that moment. And for me, that is somewhat alleviated by thinking just about, okay, this moment in time, what do I need to do, or what am I doing, and how can I do it without thinking about how I used to do it, or how it used to feel, or what might come.
Okay, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that's great. I appreciate you disclosing that information, and yeah, and really thinking about things sometimes just in the moment, you know, and not thinking about, you know, the what ifs even down the road, right? So that's great.
You can still think in this moment,
Yeah.
it sucks. Like this moment sucks.
Yeah.
But so you don't have to deny anything. It just kind of like
yeah,
not
definitely.
build on it too much.
Kind of experience it and deal with it in the circumstances, and then, you know, hopefully once you have kind of sat with what you're feeling and what you're going through, be able to kind of learn from that and move forward, right? So that's great. Thank you. All right. So are there any other resources, organizations that you would recommend to individuals who may need help, you know, right now, even as we're starting to come out of this current lockdown? And maybe Randy, we can start with you.
Well, doing information, as you know, at Independent Living Nova Scotia. Well, one of the things, I mean, there's good resources, 211. That's a really good a government resource, because it has, you know, programs for nonprofits and government programs as well. So, but I think a lot of times, I think people need to, you know, people should, you know, if they are able to reach out to other people, you know, in their sort of in their group or whatever, friends or whatever, and try to find them, you know, just getting that support, and just, you know, asking other people where they can find such and such supports. And also there's a lot of mental health supports as well that are in the community. So that's a good thing. But I mean, the thing is like, I think, because I get a fair amount, I get some phone calls, people, you know, they said, well, I've called 8 people so far and I'm looking for this sort of resource. So again, it's that reaching out and trying to connect with organizations, your friends. They might have an idea for you. Just trying to, you know, and also, yeah, just trying to look and just trying to find information somehow. So
Yeah,
that's about it.
definitely. No, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and our network and reaching out to, and you know,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, even 211. Yeah, they have a wealth of information on possible resources. So that's a great great tips there. Julianne, do you have any resources or organizations or tips that you would recommend to folks who might need help right now?
Well, aside from calling Randy, which I've done quite
Yes,
often.
yes, yes. I love it. I love it when you call.
I mean, I guess what I try to do is figure out what I need or what I'm looking for as best I can. And I would encourage others to do that too, and to talk about it with other people, to try to figure that out if that's what they want to do. And you know, often if you have access to the internet, and a lot of people don't, and a lot of people might, but they don't have the technology. So, you know, understanding all of that, sometimes you can find good information. I think it's good to be cautious about the information you find and double check it. But sometimes there's good information online about, so I've been trying to buy a Braille display or figure out if I can buy a Braille display, and I needed to find out what there was, you know, available, how much it was going to cost, all that kind of stuff. So I wasn't sure what I wanted until I did a little research online. And then I was able to follow up with, find who I needed to talk to, tell them what I needed or wanted or thought I needed and wanted, and kind of follow that track. But honestly, in terms of community resources, I would just start with Randy or the Independent Living Nova Scotia, but generally that's Randy for me.
Thank you. Thank you for the plug.
Yeah, I was going to say, Randy, you're going to have a ton of phone calls and emails.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
It's a wonderful resource. So
definitely.
Thank you.
It is very valuable for sure. All right. And Heather, do you have any additional resources or organizations that you would recommend to people during that may need?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share just a couple that have come up for me over the past year. One is, so the government of Canada created a website or like a portal, a wellness portal called Wellness Together. And in addition to bi-weekly mental health tracker, there's other resources on there. They also have a texting service. So you can get paired with a trained mental health professional by texting the word wellness to 741-741. I've used this resource twice and I've really enjoyed it. You know, it absolutely doesn't replace real therapy, but in the moment, it's a nice supportive way to connect with another person and challenge maybe some thoughts that you're having. And as well as another resource for people who are technologically inclined and want to use like a cell phone, there's this great app called WoeBot. So instead of robot, it's Woe, like WOE bot. It's like an AI, an artificial intelligence chat that walks you through CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. And it's a nice little, it messages you every day for you to check in on your mental health and how you're doing. And then it'll walk you through different exercises that you can do, as well as in the moment, if you're having a moment of crisis or if you're anxious or panicking, it has tools to check in and challenge those thoughts and work through them in the moment, which is really cool. And I've really enjoyed that resource as well. So if you are a techie person and want to try engaging before maybe reaching out for real therapy or want to test out something like this could be a cool resource for you. So
that's cool.
Yeah,
for those two.
That's great. Yeah, I've never heard of the Wobot, so that's great. Thank you for sharing that, and all of those resources. Yeah, those are great. All right, perfect. So the final question I have, and we have left room for additional questions from the audience, but you know, I've mentioned we're slowly but surely coming out of this lockdown. What are folks excited about having access to, or you know, people that they may have access to, or getting out and about? And maybe Julianne, we can start with you.
Sure. Well, so I'm just looking forward to not worrying so much about where I am in relation to other people, honestly.
Yeah.
That will be a huge relief for me. I'm okay with wearing, I'm happy to wear a mask. I'm happy, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And there will still be the need to do a lot of things. But once we have, you know, the right percentage of people with 2 vaccines and so on,
Yes. Yeah.
to not have to be quite as alert about, you know, 6 feet or more away from somebody will be that will just give me a feeling of a lot more freedom in my movement. And I'm really looking forward to that. I mean, I'd love to have a hamburger in a food court too, but there's other things. There's lots of other things I'm looking forward to, you know, being on campus again in person. I'm looking forward to seeing my friends in the cafeteria, and, you know, people just saying hi to people, and you know, getting back on the bus. I haven't been on the bus since last March. Oh, well, no, that's not quite true, but it's been very sporadic and not for a long time. So I'm just looking forward to more feeling of freedom, I think.
Yeah, no, that's good.
And a hamburger.
I would agree with you there that it will be nice to be able to just go out and not have to worry about, you know, where you've been, and if you can go somewhere. And so that's great. Thank you. Yeah, Heather, what are you looking forward to as we slowly come out of this?
I would say I'm certainly looking forward to, you know, being able to gather with friends more is going to be a big one for me. And getting out and being able to go, you know, hiking in those smaller groups with friends is something that I really, really enjoy. So I'm getting out to the lake, you know, all of those wonderful experiences. I'm also looking forward to being able to gather in like broader community groups again. You know, for example, I think it's hard. We've missed over Christmas, you know, we missed our holiday gala. The Halifax Pride Festival that happens every summer has had to be virtual, and this will be the second summer in a row where there'll be a lot of virtual events that just aren't quite as that same like community spirit and joy that we can really bring out. So I'm looking forward to really feeling that joy again. Even though there are moments of joy, it's you know, to sort of feel it more freely is going to be really exciting.
That's great. Yeah, and I can echo that there. It will be exciting to be able to gather and to kind of rejoin in those communities, and even though we've had access to them virtually, but yeah, to really connect to community again. So that's great. Thank you. And Randy, what are you looking forward to?
Wasn't this the question of the day at our staff meeting?
It was.
I'm looking to the notes. I don't see what I said there. I'm trying to look back to see what I said, but I don't see it in the notes.
That's okay. Whatever you're feeling in the moment, you go for it.
So one of the things that I like to get back to is, well, in the summertime, it's really nice just to be out on the deck and have a beer. You know, and have something to eat out on a deck or outside. That's something that's going to be nice. And, you know, I think I mentioned, like, also I need a haircut desperately. Like in the end of April, I was so excited, I'm going to get a haircut. And then all of a sudden everything closed down. And I said, oh no, I have to maybe get my daughter to get the number 1 or number 2 bowl and put it on my head and cut around it. But so just getting out and traveling too around the province now that we can do that.
Yeah.
So that's going to be exciting as well. We can go outside of our community and then enjoy nature and whatever. So that's going to be good. So yeah.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can also echo the haircut and and needing to get that done.
Yeah.
That's great. So before we wrap up with this event, thank you for all of the information and content that each of you has provided to us today. But I do want to take some time if any of our participants who are here today, if they want to ask some additional specific questions, and you can do that either in the Zoom chat function, or you can unmute and just ask your question verbally.
I have a question, Keelan.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Julian, you had mentioned that you're debating whether now is the time to get another seeing eye dog. I have 2 questions about that. If you don't get one now, how will that affect your ability to be out doing things? And because you've already had one, are you automatically on a list for a replacement, or do you have to wait?
I'll try to answer the second one first and then I'll try to remember your first one. So I might have to ask. So I am not on a list. So I go to the Seeing Eye for my dogs. There are very good schools elsewhere, but I've always gone to this place, and every place has little differences in their training and so on. And so I just keep going back to the same place because I understand the training and it seems to work for me. So I will call them or email them, tell them that I am, I have retired, Eric, and that I will be coming back. I will have to do I will have to get a medical examination and so on and submit it. And then they will put me, or this is the way it used to work. I have to double check, frankly, to be sure. But then I will go into the pool for being matched with a dog. And it will be then this process of them finding a dog, a good match between a dog and me. And that takes as long as it takes. So I'm not assured of anything. In terms of time, I mean, I'm fairly certain that there somewhere is another dog that I can work with, but I don't know how long that might take. And to answer your first question, how it affects how I think it was how it affects how I move around in my community and do those things. So I will say a couple of things about that there is an emotional loss, even though my dogs stay with me. All but one wasn't able to. But all of the three or four have stayed with me for their entire lives once they've come to me. And working with a dog is such a close relationship emotionally and physically and every other way, that when I stop working with them, although they're still with me, there is a grief that I experience. Like it's a very heavy grief. I was crying on the treadmill earlier this week, actually. It is just a real sense of loss, because you know that, like, you're not going to share those moments of that communication that is so difficult to describe, but that happens every minute of the day when you're working with them. So, what are you seeing? So I never say, what are you seeing? It's all transmitted through the harness. And what I send to them, what they send to me. So there's the ether, and then there's the harness. And you have to, in my preparation to accept and bring that to another relationship, I have to make room for that. And so I go through this grieving process where then my retired guide dog becomes a pet in the true sense of the word, although they are always, Eric has retired, but he will still guide me to the front door on a leash if I take him out to pee. But that my expectations of how we work together has to change because he's not in harness. So, anyway, so how it changes how I move around the community is I move around now with my cane, and there's pros and cons to both. And a lot of people choose to not use a guide dog for really, really good reasons. But what I find about using the cane is that, first of all, there's not that emotional connection to the cane. I really don't. I don't love the cane. I am pretty proficient with the cane. Like I feel solid in my traveling with the cane, but a cane will give me information on what's in front of me, probably 3 feet ahead. And that's it. So what a dog gives me is kind of, within my bubble that is kind of like above my head, probably 2 feet maybe, and around us, our combined width. The dog and I are working together to figure that out and to make adjustments based on that. That's not true with a cane. With a cane, it's me alone trying to figure that out, which is, the stress that comes from working with a cane in this particular moment, where trying to figure out where 6 feet away from someone is can be difficult. But with a dog, I'd still have to do that. But a dog is trained to avoid obstacles, whereas the cane is not trained for anything. The cane is only as good as me. So it's a very different way of moving around the community. It's a very different way of engaging with people. Anyway, sorry, it's just a beautiful, intense kind of relationship that can be hard to sort of break down. But I hope that answers your question. Tell me if it didn't. I'll do better.
No, that was exactly what I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah, no, those are great answers. Thank you for sharing that, Julianne. So we have a couple more minutes. Are there any other questions that folks would like to ask?
I had a question, actually a two-part question. Heather touched and Julianne as well on this, but simply I'd just like to ask, is there anything in anybody's life that that has permanently changed because of COVID?
What a good question.
And also in society, are we going to get rid of cash, or are we going to, have we stopped permanently shaking hands forever, or, things like that? If anybody would care to comment on that.
Oh, that's a good question.
The handshake is what came to my mind, is that I think that would be, I don't know if I can see that coming back, although we'll see. I feel like that's one that could go to the wayside. I would like to have, there's things I would like to be permanently gone, but that might not necessarily be the reality. So there's that too. Yeah, I don't know if other panelists have thoughts.
Well, I think the fist pump was actually picking up speed before the pandemic. It was. I fist pump a lot.
All right, so maybe that'll be the new handshake.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So I am intrigued by this fist pump. I have never done it because I don't know that a blind person like moving their fist around is a good idea.
Knock somebody down, yeah. Gives a whole different look at the fist pump.
Yeah, it could, yeah, it could be a bad thing. So I haven't done that. It's so interesting, the handshake idea, because it's really awkward. You know, I end up clapping my hands, and then I don't know why I do that because it's more helpful if other people clap their hands so I know where their hands are, but I tend to do it for some bizarre reason. I think I think probably technology, the role that technology plays in our lives is more widely understood to be important and useful. And I'm hoping that is something that continues to be available and is made more widely available to people, like in terms of access related technology in particular. I'm hoping that is now recognized as not just a useful tool, not just, you know, whatever, a tool to use in a time of remote living, but a really important and critical tool for everyday living. I would say that's something that I'm hoping has changed. And in my life, so I was thinking, is anything permanently, do I think anything has permanently changed in my life? And I honestly, I don't know. That's such a good question, in that I've never thought of it before, and I really don't know. But I'll be thinking of it now as I go about my life.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, technology, hopefully. I know this has come up a few times in a few conversations I've had in terms of even, you know, not having to travel long distances to like a conference or a specific meeting, even though that's nice and
Totally,
I like
yeah.
travel, but you know, it does make it more accessible when you have the different technology pieces in play and that everyone has access to them, of course. That's an important point, but yeah, that's a good point, Julianne, around the technology piece. So it'll be interesting to see in the years to come how those types of environments change or stay the same. So before we wrap up, are there any other final questions that folks would like to ask? All right, well, I'm going to take that silence as a no. And again, I want to thank everyone for attending, and you know, a special and big thank you for all of our panelists and for you know, committing to today. I can't believe it's it's been an hour and a half, so I'm sure people are ready to go have lunch and enjoy the rest of the day. But I want to thank everyone again for attending and for sharing all of that information. And one quick final note, so Heather and Michelle are hosting a virtual trivia event this afternoon from 2 to 3. So if anyone wants to hop in on that, we do have that information on our website and on all of our social media channels. So that'll be our final event for today's Independent Living Across Canada Day celebrations. But thank you, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But thank you everyone again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, panelists. It was an amazing discussion.
Thank
It
you.
was a real pleasure.
It was fun.
Yes,
It was fun.
it was great.
Hope to see you all soon.
Yeah, Julianne, I'll
Thank
see
you,
you.
Julianne.
Fingers
Thank
crossed.
care.
Nice seeing you again.
Thank
Okay,
you.
you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.